Hello, my name is Melissa Johnson and I'm the mayor of the city of Chelsea. While we cannot be together on Veterans Day this year due to the pandemic, on behalf of the city of Chelsea, I want to honor and recognize the efforts, dedication, and sacrifices of the men and women who have served in the United States Armed Forces. In the United States, there are approximately 18 million veterans who have served in at least one war. 7 million of those veterans served in the Vietnam War, and 3 million have served in the support of the War on Terror. Approximately 9% of all veterans are women. Veterans are our family members, neighbors, community members, and colleagues who have served, often with great personal sacrifice. They sacrificed time with their families and friends, missed major milestones, had their careers put on hold, and witnessed things that many of us cannot comprehend or imagine. Veterans made these sacrifices and did their duty to serve the common good and to uphold and promote the ideals of democracy. The value of service for the greater good is something that is often underrated and underappreciated. Today and throughout the year, I hope that we take example from the following words of President John F. Kennedy. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. And so, on Veterans Day, I encourage everyone to reflect on the lives, honor, and sacrifices of our veterans, and ask how you can show your appreciation by serving your community. Your service and your commitment to the greater good is needed now more than ever. I want to thank our partners, the American Legion Post Number 31 and Chelsea District Library, for their continued support of the Veterans Day programs. At this time, I invite you to listen to the Veterans Day message from American Legion Post Commander Howard J. Flintoff, and to the interviews and stories of the veterans from the Chelsea community that are part of the Chelsea District Library Stories of Chelsea.
I'd like to welcome everybody for Veterans Day services that we're having today. On this day, Veterans Day, we are commemorating the service of veterans of all wars. We remember how men and women set aside their civilian pursuits to serve their nation's cause, defending the freedom of mankind and preserving our precious American heritage. We believe our strength on the field of battle, on the supply lines which nourished our armed might, lay in the justice of our cause against the forces of evil. We believe our determination made us better warriors because we fought with our minds and our hearts as well as our bodies. We recognize service to country and her cause does not end with the termination of military service. We continue our endeavors in behalf of an honorable world peace with a feeling of profound gratitude to God and to the men and women who gave their lives as part of the cost of the noblest of causes. Out of blood and sweat, we learn to purpose, sacrifice, tolerance, bravery, and discipline. These are solid foundation stones upon which a great nation is built. In our continuing quest for an honorable world peace, we must cultivate these virtues. War has taught us the lessons of obedience to command. The game is more than the player, and the ship is more than the crew. There is a greater discipline we must now pursue if we are to preserve this virtue of obedience in our quest for an honorable world peace. That is obedience to the laws we ourselves make in the voluntary discipline of citizenship. Under our system of government, we may change the laws by majority rule. We may persuade our neighbors to new theories or new courses. We may advocate in free elections the choice of veterans or plans. As good citizens, we follow the choice of majority, whether that choice be the individuals or not. This is the virtue of discipline which must be ours in peace. This is the lesson we must learn at home, in school, on the playing fields, in organizations, in the community, and the nation. It is a lesson in voluntary obedience to the decisions of the majority. We must not be unmindful either of the conclusions of other people with whom we have joined in the quest for an honorable world peace. This is the higher order of disciplines. In time of peace, we can use the ennobling virtues of war and put behind us its ugliness and suffering. In peace, we shall go forward together to scale new heights of achievement, in unity of purpose, in sacrifice for the common good, in tolerance for those of different faiths and creeds, in bravery to fight for social and economic gains, and in the discipline of good citizenship. We shall move forward in the sight of God as a strong nation in a peaceful world. I would invite everybody to enjoy the presentation that the Chelsea District Library in the City of Chelsea is putting together. Please thank a veteran today, living or dead, your neighbors, your cousins, your uncles, the guy across the street, woman in the grocery store. All veterans need to be thanked for their sacrifices today. Thank you very much.
My fellow Americans, not long ago I received a letter from a woman in the Midwest. She wrote, "Dear Mr. President, in my humble way I am writing to you about the crisis in Vietnam. I have a son who is now in Vietnam. My husband served in World War II. Our country was at war, but now this time it's just something that I don't understand. Why must young Americans, born into a land exultant with hope and with golden promise, toil and suffer and sometimes die in such a remote and distant place? We have learned at a terrible and a brutal cost that retreat does not bring safety, and weakness does not bring peace. And it is this lesson that has brought us to Vietnam."
The first commitment I ever made in my life that I recall was I swore in that I would follow our commander-in-chief at that time for 4 years. That's what I signed up for. And that time it was President Kennedy was commander-in-chief. It was that domino effects that we were led to believe that communism would take over the world, that we did not stop them in Vietnam. I believed it.
The more countries that are under the communist flag, the more powerful that side will be. So you want to try to stop it as far away as you can. Whenever the communists around the world try to push, whether it's in East Berlin or the Berlin Wall, or Malaysia that the British fought a war in the 50s, or in Korea, or in Vietnam, that we have to push back to keep them contained.
Some teachers from Chelsea, Jim Legault, who was an English teacher at Chelsea, and his wife, Gwen Legault, who taught English and speech, he felt that we would soon be deeply involved in the Vietnam War. This was before the big buildup, and that he mentioned that, you know, he thought we would have 500,000 troops there. Nailed that one.
It's like a civil war. Okay, the communists are coming down. They want to corrupt these people. Well, government says, okay, we're going to go over there and help these people. That's all they ever told us as far as the politics of it. We were going over to help the South Vietnamese.
It was during my service there that I realized that we were actually trying to train the South Vietnamese to defend their own rights, and they had no desire to do so. A lot of the guys were trying to get into colleges or skilled trades apprenticeships to avoid the draft. The draft was something we all feared.
As young guys, at that point, we started to consider the possibility that we might end up in the military or might be drafted.
I think reality set in when I remember sitting up in my room, and it just hit me that I might never see this again, you know.
I dropped out of college thinking I had a way to get a draft deferrable job. Come to find out that the company had lost all of its contracts. So I was high and dry in the summer of '67, no protection, no job, no nothing.
I was going to college because it was expected at the time, but I wasn't really that much of a student. Some of the guys were volunteering to go in together, and so they joined the Army together with the idea of staying together.
There was Roy Lang, Don Salyers, Jerry Whitaker, and myself. I was 20 years old, be just about 46 years ago, right around this time. Me and 3 other Chelsea guys were drafted into the U.S. Army. I was a little wild back in my younger days. Fast cars and stuff like this. My father told me that, he said, Tom, I think the service might do you some good because we are going down the wrong path.
Got my draft notice in, I think it was August of 1968. And, I found out the same day that I got my draft notice that my wife was pregnant. So I thought, would that affect my draft status? And I went to the draft board and brought that up, and they said no.
I was drafted right after my 21st birthday, so we took the 21st birthday as an opportunity to celebrate in town. And there were some other small parties from family, going away parties. Lots of, you know, stay alive, keep your head low, all that, you know, the trivial stuff that people say when they don't really understand what's going to happen anyway, including myself. I had no idea what I was getting into.
There's only one thing to say about you going into the service. Hurry and get the hell back. So that was pretty appropriate. My parents were sad to see me go. My dad, who was a World War II veteran, was in really bad shape. He was crying, and you know, every night he'd look at me and kind of turn away and cry. And I don't know if I wanted to prove that I was courageous or what, but I didn't, you know, feel that bad about it.
The day I was drafted, in front of Lenawee County Courthouse, that's my grandmother, my wife, myself, my grandfather, and my wife's father. Kind of a heartbreaker for everybody, actually. Because of what was going on in Vietnam, they didn't expect me to make it back. 1A was a for sure draft, and that's what I was.
I think probably if you were warm and you could walk 10 feet unassisted, you were basically acceptable.
At the news, there was always something about Vietnam on, and you'd get the body counts and the different tactical situations that were going on at the time. I was 20 years old and I got married. It was a big Kielbasa Hall Polish wedding. 200-300 people. I'm in my uniform, my wife's in her whites, you know, big wedding, you know, 5-piece, 6-piece band, you know, everybody thought we were nuts.
I couldn't find a card that said, I'll miss you more than words would ever say, and that I'll be waiting for you. Love, Barbara. That's Barbara. And she actually dumped me during basic training.
There were fellows that were forced to go into service because they'd been in so much trouble. There were fellows that were from, you might say, richer families who had failed at college and had to go into service. There were farm boys, Indians, Mexicans, all races, good, bad, and ugly. Okay?
It's a very scary thing being at boot camp. because you're totally isolated from the outside world. You can't make phone calls to anyone, including your family. You can't go anywhere. You're basically a prisoner on that recruit depot.
The day or so after we were there, when they marched us through to get our haircuts, they had a barber there with a great sense of humor. How would you like that, son? And you'd say, oh, I'll tell you what, just a little off the top and trim me up around the ears a little bit, will you? And he'd get a big old grin on his face, and you could tell by the look of those clippers, there was no shield on that whatsoever, and away the mowing machine went.
I thought to myself, man, you know, you gave up Cornell University to do this. Just because I'm an engineer, I said, okay, how much time is this going to be? And then I figured it out in seconds till when I got out of the Army. And it was like 91 million seconds until I was a free man again. Now, you know, that's like a glutton for punishment would do that, right?
They just gave you a whole bunch of shots. And they had these I guess, pneumatic shotguns. You just put it to your arm. There's no needle, but it forces it in there.
You know, we had to have typhoid and typhus, smallpox, tetanus, 7, 8 or something like that kind of shots. And that was really kind of funny because they lined up all of these doctors to have the shots there. And I have to tell you, I've never seen so many wimps in my life. These doctors they were passing out, and I'm going, my goodness, we've all had shots, you've given shots. Come on, guys, grow up. I couldn't figure what was going on here.
I remember vividly the political propaganda boards that were all around that base about winning and fighting communism.
I remember the calisthenics out there, and when it was 90 degrees plus, and that was hot out there on the field, once in a while somebody would pass out because of the heat. But we had obstacle course to run, training what happened if you came into a situation like with tear gas or gas. We had to go through that. Yeah, I had been running track in Chelsea High School, so I just finished the track season in spring of '63, so no problem physically.
You're so active and so hungry. The food is trash, but it tastes really good. Horrible, but it sure tasted good when you're out there burning all those calories.
They always had you so physically active, you just felt like you weren't getting enough to eat at any particular time, you know. Let's put 8 scoops of dressing on that salad because that's something more I can put down there, you know.
I like the food, but I learned one thing. Take what you want, but you better eat what you take.
Eating 3 Army meals a day, and even with the PT, the basic training, I actually gained weight. I gained about 20 pounds.
But I didn't know. I mean, I was 21. I was just like everybody else. I shaved my head, and I was a recruit. I figured it out. And don't be the worst one.
Just didn't understand going in that, you know, having a Marine DI screaming at you about something is a higher motivation than, oh, I think I'll go out and do some exercise today.
I think a lot of us knew toward the end, especially of boot camp, that most of us were going to Vietnam. I mean, that was a well-known fact. You heard it all over.
Everybody out of my basic training, all of us went to Vietnam. We were done with our classes, and they had a big formation, and they read the orders. I can remember standing out there with the several hundred people, and they'd say, John Doe, Republic of Vietnam. Jim Smith, Republic of Vietnam. And it was just, you know, one after the other, and that was it.
Ngày vui vui qua chúng em thay nhau bắt tay hôn nhau mắt mừng là mừng. Mình đi ra phố mua áo phan son hoa giày xe.
Went to Oakland Army Terminal. Had to wait there until they got flights, and then they'd send you on to Vietnam. So we were there for about a week. While we were there was demonstrators outside the gate, so we couldn't go into town. We couldn't go into San Francisco or Oakland or any place because of the people out there demonstrating against Vietnam War. About 2 days before we left, the Hells Angels came along. They were a big motorcycle gang at that time, and they broke up the demonstrations outside the gates. I don't know if they were for the war or against the war, but they done us a favor After being on that base all week, you wanted to go somewhere. And you knew as soon as you got your orders to get on a plane, you were going to Vietnam.
A lot of guys didn't even know where Vietnam was. We shipped out of Boston Harbor on two troop transports, the USS Darby and the USS Patch. I was on the Patch. As far as I know, we were the only unit that ever did that. I've talked to other people that says, oh yeah, we flew over.
Turns out we're going on a ship. They didn't tell us anything about that. So I was happy about that because I had 3 weeks on ship to lay around and play Monopoly.
I remember the heat coming in that plane. It was hot. Oh, that's what my first impression was when I walked off that plane. Oh, the heat, and that time of the morning.
And the smell was so different. The air, just the smell of Vietnam. It was just a jungle kind of damp, sort of foul-smelling thing. You knew you were in a different place.
217 or so guys in this aircraft haven't showered for a day and a half, and you're hoping to get out of there, and then you walk out, and that heat and humidity socks you right in the face. You stand up and whoa.
I remember flying in, I had a window seat, and you look down, I thought we were looking at craters, bomb craters and a bunch of them. And what it was really is the graves, because the graves over there, you have like a tombstone in the middle and then a little circular wall around the outside. So from the air, I thought they were craters, but they weren't.
As we were leaving, going the other way was a line of troops getting on the plane that had done their tour. And I remember that their fatigues were faded, they were tan, they looked older than they probably were. And I remember them making some remarks and things like that, but they ran on and we ran off.
You get over there, within 2 weeks, you get an attitude that says, okay, they're out to kill us. You find that out right off the bat. Well, they aren't going to do it, so we're going to kill them first. If you're going to mess with me, you're going to mess with all of us.
I remember, the first person I ever had to shoot and kill. You remember that because it was either you or him. That's just the way it was.
It was not a friendly place to be. Even base camp was susceptible to attack. I'll say on average, every other day at least, we would get some sort of an RPG rounds fired at us or mortars launched at us.
It was a direct hit on the maintenance tent. So you can see all the shells just blew it out. That's the truck. You could hear the shells and whistling kind of sound that would come in and boom, you just hit the ground and waited for it to go. It was always very short-lived. They would throw in maybe, 10, 12 mortars into the base camp, and then they were gone.
The one night we were sitting and just starting to watch this movie, I don't remember what it was, and I was just aware all of a sudden of hearing multiple explosions up in the compound, which was maybe 100 yards from where I was to my medic's bunker. And somebody yelled that it was a mortar attack, and I remember looking and everybody was gone really fast.
When the rounds started coming in, we always headed for the bunker. Have you ever seen 25 guys try to get through the same doorway at the same time?
Every night we usually got incoming rockets or mortars. That siren was always going off.
We were fortunate that the only kind of thing we had to worry about was what Charlie could carry on his back. He didn't have air support down there. He didn't have tanks. He didn't have roads to bring anything in to speak of. I always said, thank God they didn't have the ability to do the rest of that stuff because we were getting enough shit anyways.
Most of us didn't think we were going to make it back. And you're down about it, but you know you have a duty to do and you're going to do it. And so you're there. But in the back of your mind, you're really thinking, this is war, this is the end.
My God, how am I going to do this? 3 days later, you're out in the field with a 100-pound rucksack on your back, and you're doing it, not thinking anything about it.
My wife just read a letter. This is the first letter I wrote to her from Vietnam. Hi, Diane. Well, I finally made it. It's a wonderful, beautiful place, and I hope you don't believe me. This is my first day in Vietnam. And I'm at a replacement depot, waiting for reassignment.
so I don't know my address yet. Probably by tomorrow or the next day I should know. Did you get the package I sent you? I hope you like it. Vietnam is a pretty hard place to believe really exists. It's really hard to live here. No running water is drinkable, so you can't use it. It's getting dark here and it's cooled off to a pleasant temperature, but during the day it's hell. Hot and dry, dust is everywhere, nothing is clean. Oh, I just have to tell you about our beautiful plane trip. 26 hours sitting in an airplane with 219 guys that stink. You can't sleep and you can't get comfortable. I saved my plane ticket and I'm sending it back to you for me. So put it in your scrapbook or something. Well, a boy just came around and said I have to put the lights out. Something about the guard posts can't see. I thought about you all last night. Boy, I sure miss you. There's only one thing I can tell you. Love me like I love you. Now I better change the subject before I start crying or something. The people are pretty weird too.
They're really, really small. It goes more. What scared me most about the jungle were the leeches. I don't know what it was about the leeches, but you know, I had guys that would come back and they would tell these stories about burning the leeches off with cigarette butts or cigarettes, and whew, just gave me the willies.
They had rats as big as kittens. They're cats, and they're not to be messed with. It was their bunker, and they knew it.
It was quite common to feel something scurry along, you know, across your body or something as you're sleeping on your cot. And, you know, it was a rat. I think I was more scared of that than incoming.
There's monkeys over there.
Hate rats.
And the monkeys run around out in the dark, and it's dark. And they run around through out there making noise, and you don't know if it's a person or what's out there, what animals out there.
We went out on a mission, and we heard this rattling, and actually we opened fire, and we had a boa constrictor that came in, and this is back in the rear again, but we brought the snake back with us.
There's leeches there, there's snakes, there's all kinds, ants. A lot of the tunnels that we encountered were set below ant hills, which were hundreds of years old. They were like 5 foot tall, as solid as cement. Myself and a guy named Gene Peach from Indiana, him and I were the smallest, shortest, smallest guys at that time. We were asked to go in the tunnels, told, I don't remember, but commanding officer or whoever's in charge say, go down there and see if there's anything there. So this is, sure, okay. I would sit there and I would keep pulling the rope from them, thinking that I'm going down there, and I didn't. And I told them, I said, I don't see anything, I'm coming back out. I came back out. So they thought I went down way down the tunnel, and I didn't. And I wasn't going to. You know, if they can get away, they can get away, and they're going home, and I'm gonna go home.
The Vietnamese have been fighting this war 1,000 years. I mean, there have been people in their country, you know, French before us, and just seem we never quite learn from the past.
When I was there, I didn't know that Vietnam originally asked the U.S. for help. They looked to the U.S. as an example that, you know, the U.S. fought against a imperial power and won their independence. Vietnam asked the U.S. to help them do the same thing, and we said no because we had treaties with the French and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, we kind of let them down because of that.
Throughout South Vietnam, there were sympathizers with North Vietnam. You couldn't tell enemy from friendly. They all looked alike.
You know, everybody had straw hats, black pajamas, and if you didn't have a weapon, I mean, you could be a friendly. You could be South Vietnamese. You know, that's the ones you're fighting for. Now, if they got a weapon, they're carrying an AK-47, well, that's your enemy, you know.
The VC would walk up and down the road, but you didn't know it during the day. Then at night, they pull their guns out.
In order to survive, if you watch somebody walk sideways, then you walk sideways because he's been there 3 days longer than you and he's still here, okay? And so you paid attention to the people that have been out in the field the most. That's what you did. It's really on-the-job training.
When your life's on the line, you can't believe how easy it is to pay attention. Grass and reeds strewn about to cover the mine up. Other times you see a piece of like monofilament fish line or string.
There were paths in the jungle that we followed, but we would typically not walk on them. We would walk alongside them, a little bit off them. because many times they were booby-trapped.
Walking through the jungle is not quiet. You try to walk as quiet as you can, but it's just about impossible. I mean, if there's a VC out there waiting for you, they aren't making any noise, and if they hear any noise, they know it's us.
It was very dense jungle. We were in some areas that were defoliated with the Agent Orange. Looked like fall, like a small fire had gone through on a fall day. There was no foliage, nothing on the ground, and everything scorched.
You carried your C rations, which were unbelievable World War II C rations that had the dates from World War II on it. And they were still good, and you ate them. They were 1942, 43, 44. I said, really? And you'd open up the box and you'd eat it, you know, and you learned not to throw the food away if you didn't like it, because the enemy would find that, you know. You learned to bury the cans because they would use the cans to set up booby traps. If you left anything there, they used it against you.
I have a little memento here. This was part of the detonator. It was an ingenious little device where they had made a bamboo stake, split it vertically, wrapped a bunch of like rubber bands were tightly wrapped around it, and then it had two little like tin pieces on the top, like contacts with wires, and then this was holding them apart. And then this had a long wire on it, and they got back there and they pulled that out, and the contacts, and it must have been some battery or I don't know what, it set off the charge. It's a tangible reminder of that time. Yeah, I guess it was knowing it was some little thing that came from the hand of the enemy.
We were going in through some underbrush and things. It was pretty rough getting through some of that stuff. Well, it used to be an old trail, and we did not know that. And it was mined. And every one of us had stepped over a bouncing Betty. The mines are buried, and you have a little stem that sticks out of the ground. And it's just a small, it looks like a twig. When you step on that, it detonates it, and it bounces up and goes off. Well, we usually try to walk in everybody else's footsteps, so I would have been just inches away from detonating it myself, because we were always close in our footsteps. And it's just fate. I mean, Tom hit it, it went off, and tore him up bad. It took Bob Halbert's both legs right off. I mean, this mine is one of the worst mines they have. Tom's screaming, Ned's bleeding, I'm on the radio, trying to get medevac and help for these guys. At the same time, we went under fire. It's chaos. It's just really, it's hard to explain now. I mean, it's been 46 years, and I don't think there's a day go by that I don't have flashbacks of some sort about, there were so many missions, so many missions.
If you were in the infantry and you made it a whole year in the field, that was one hell of an accomplishment. You know, we had guys that would fake all kinds of stuff to get out of the field. The most famous one is taking a C-can rationing opener, which is a little funky bottle opener or can opener, and making two prick marks like you'd gotten, and claim you'd gotten bit by a rat or a mouse.
If we got them on board alive, they had like a 94 or 5% chance of surviving. That was our job. I was a medevac pilot, a dust-off pilot. You're out in the jungle and you're carrying a gun and you get hurt. If I don't come and get you, guess what? You don't make it.
It was unbelievable the way they could fly. My point man one night stepped on a booby trap and blew both of us up. Our radio operator, it's pitch dark, you can't see your hand in front of you, and they call for a medevac chopper. I remember looking over and he's laying on the ground with his hands cupped with a cigarette in it, okay, drawing on the cigarette where they could see the light to come in and pick us up. So, I mean, those guys were, they were miraculous. I mean, there could be gunfire going on all over the place and they're coming in to pick people up.
They were so crazy they get themselves killed. And then if you talk to them, they would give the doctors all the credit for saving the troops and one thing or another. But the real credit goes to the helicopter pilots, because if they could go in and pick these kids up that were hurt and are dangerous, get them back to the hospital, the doctors wouldn't have been able to do anything.
That's backwards. You were taught to hot rod your helicopter. That was the 3rd Flight Platoon. And you just run it very fast and come in at 120 knots. Bam! Spot that thing down, throw those guys on, pick it up, turn around, go low level out as fast as you can. You didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on the ground.
So that's the Loach.
Safest area was about 5,000 feet.
And that's the Huey. For actual combat assaults and using them as gunships and stuff, that was developed during the Vietnam era. The Huey was really the utility aircraft. So it did everything from medevac to combat assault to resupply, flying dignitaries, you name it. The UH-1 was used for that.
You get maybe 6 guys on the inside and maybe 4 guys hanging on the outside until the chopper land, and everybody just jump off and the chopper would be gone in a matter of seconds. If you went back to with the chopper, you were in trouble, because company commander would be waiting for you. Why didn't you get off?
I was afraid of heights, so I'm put in a helicopter, which I'd never been in before. So I'm sitting like I am here next to the door gunner, looking out of this helicopter and down, truly petrified.
The pilot will tell you, okay, everybody off right now, and you have to get off, and you might be 2 feet, 3 feet above the rice paddy or whatever. When you jump off, you're sinking right down because you got 50, 60, 70 pound pack on you.
They never landed the helicopters. They would only come in low, and you'd start getting off, and the helicopter would rise as the weight left the helicopter. So the last guy off had a pretty good jump.
I typically flew lead just because they usually wouldn't shoot lead down. I figured that out, because they wanted to get some troops on the ground, because then the rest of them had to come in and either pick them up or put more troops on the ground. Because once they had a few people down there, pretty vulnerable.
All I remember is all these tracers. You can hear them hitting the helicopter. I was on the ground. We had gone in the Delta area, in the rice paddy area, to pick up some wounded GIs. And we got ambushed. And I got hurt, and my medic got hurt. And we flew that helicopter out.
I felt something in my left hip, and I looked down, I didn't see any blood or anything, and I thought this is like hitting a stick against you or something like that. And I said, okay, then I'm okay, didn't feel anything. So as we were advancing towards the wood line, a guy I know, Soik from Indiana, got wounded. So I went over there to help him, and as I kneeled down, I got hit in the shoulder, knocked me back, and while I was laying there, I got hit in the stomach. Well, I realized what happened because there was some pain, but then the one that hit me in the stomach, it's just like getting sucker punched by a world famous boxer, just you're standing there and all of a sudden, man, somebody hits you right in the stomach, and that's exactly what it felt like. I said, okay, this is it. I'm out of here.
I don't know how true this is, okay, but I heard that there were 67 bullet holes in my helicopter. It was just coming up onto my out-of-country R&R, and I was supposed to meet my wife in Hawaii. 5 days before that, I got shot, so I didn't make it.
Wife in Hawaii. Mary and I had our R&R in Hawaii. She flew over. We had just a great time. Great time.
I think you could go to Hawaii if you were married, or you can go to, was it Singapore or Japan or Australia or Bangkok, or like the 4 or 5 places you can go, and they pay for your trip there.
When we landed in Bangkok for our R&R, which is supposed to be rest and recuperation, I think that's the clean way of saying it. They had 6 or 7 hotels that we were not allowed into. apparently either we caused trouble before or the Australian troops had caused trouble. Australians were fighting in a war too, and they would take their R&R. Australians, every one of those guys, I think you had to be over 6'2" to be in the Australian Army, because they were, all of them were big. They were huge. And they would go in there and they would take over the whole bar. They wouldn't bother any of the US guys, but if there was any people from Bangkok or any Taiwanese or anything, they threw everybody out but the bartender and the women and the band.
They had a club. They always brought in pretty girls, which of course look but not touch. And they would, do weird dances on stage to titillate us. This was at the Enlisted Men's Club in Fubai. So every couple of weeks they'd have a group come in. They'd play rock and roll and shake and shimmy, and we'd sit there and drink and yell and scream and do all kinds of things.
At that time, drinking was almost mandatory, especially in aviation when you're on the beach. The ship's in port, and you're on the beach, you got nothing really else to do but drink.
There were a lot of drugs there. We really didn't get involved too much. There's some marijuana going around. I remember one guy said he bought a whole duffel bag full of marijuana when he first got in and buried it because he was, I think, perimeter guard or something like that. So he buried it somewhere and it lasted him this whole time there.
It was cheap. Locals would come sell it. It was, I think you could get a joint easier than you get a beer.
It was not like an everybody was stoned sort of thing. It was a couple of guys in a unit that did that on a regular basis, and that was about the extent of it. We all knew who they were, we all knew who we could count on and who we couldn't.
Some nice countryside. It's too bad that they had to be bombing it and blowing some of it up.
If you could look past the barbed wire and the sandbags and some of the destruction from, the artillery, and it was a beautiful country. It really was.
In Tain Inn, where we set up our base camp, there was a mountain which was probably 5 miles from our base camp called Nui Ba Din. It was the only mountain in the area. And there were also Buddhist temples up there, which were pretty old. And they were always off limits. We never had anything to do with them whatsoever.
So this is an up-close picture. Here, I want to show you this one because this is really interesting. That's it right there. This was a Kaudai religion, and this was taken from a helicopter doing 110 miles an hour. And the priest would live in the buildings around, these buildings over here. This would be where the priest would live. The Viet Cong felt that it was anti their religion to attack this, that the gods would come down, and they never bombed this. So this was considered by many of them as sacred, holy ground. This is inside. See, if I'd never been to Vietnam, I would never have known about this.
Some of the behaviors of Vietnamese people, their customs, seemed odd to a lot of Americans, and was unfortunate. It was not uncommon for two male friends to be holding hands. Kids, a very touching society, which was always misinterpreted by young Americans, just needlessly.
You didn't have the full cooperation of the populace either. They didn't want us in there. Local maids would come in and do our laundry and clean the barracks for us, and talking with, they just wanted everybody to leave. They wanted us to leave. They wanted the Viet Cong to go back north. Just leave them alone. They wanted to be left alone.
The Vietnamese I saw where I was at were almost like medieval farmers. They didn't have equipment to do their farming. It was all rice paddy stuff too. They used water buffalo, and they used plows behind the water buffalo. I saw a couple of tractors in South Vietnam, but I never saw them working.
Vietnam was such a beautiful country. We should have just gotten Ho Chi Minh or Lee Duc Tho, whoever we were negotiating with, and we should have sat down and said, look, we'll give you $50 billion. You can build up the country and make it into a resort. And, and just behave nicely to the people around you, and nobody will get killed. We're Americans. We're good at business, right? If only we had been able to figure that out back in the 60s.
They didn't want to have a South Vietnam and North Vietnam and have another Korea, which means you would have had to have troops over there, as we do today in South Korea.
Psychological operations are being accentuated in Vietnam to influence people to act in a manner favorable to Allied goals, to convince an enemy soldier to surrender, a Viet Cong sympathizer to rally to the cause of the Republic of Vietnam, a Vietnamese civilian to support his government. The number of Viet Cong and North Vietnamese soldiers and sympathizers who voluntarily come over to the government side has sharply increased.
These are leaflets dropped out of helicopters to warn the people that we are going to bomb you. So they had a chance to leave the area, all the innocent civilians, whatever. Ace of spades, if you had an ace of spade after you had a battle with somebody and you see all the bodies, you left an ace of spade in there, right there, let them know we were there and we took care of you. Here's telling you that if you turn yourself in, you'll be safe, you'll be fed food and given a housing and all that. I think it was a waste of time. All we did was warn them.
I had a much more positive perspective of the war before I went. Had this illusion that we really were there to do some good. When I saw how we were fighting the war and I was involved in it, I realized how absurd it was.
You pictured World War II like you would land and you ultimately would have a goal to get to Sicily or somewhere like that. Here we weren't moving in to get into North Vietnam. I mean, there was the DMZ and that's pretty much where we stopped.
Why didn't they let us go all the way to China to bomb North Vietnam? Our troops could only go to the DMZ. Let's get it over with. So I was upset with the U.S. government.
Dropped tons and tons and tons of bombs. When we called in aircraft off an aircraft carrier, fighters, we know what they came to do. If those aircraft went back to the aircraft carrier, they couldn't go with any munitions. They just dropped them wherever they needed to drop them. We destroyed a lot of property that didn't need to be destroyed. Religion played an important part for me personally. I remember Easter morning, we were in a field getting ready for one of those big assaults. It was going to be like a 30 or 40 helicopter assault, and it was just an absolutely gorgeous morning. And it happened to be Easter morning, and you wonder, how does this fit?
This is not a war like the World War II. In World War II, we were liberating people from a tyrant. And when we liberated those people, what did the French do? They loved us. They cheered us. They welcomed us. We are not getting that. Those people don't want us there. They only want one thing. They want our money.
As long as you had money, they treated you well.
Here's a lady getting a tooth pulled by her dentist. You were very worried about giving out anything for pain relief because they would come in complaining of pain. But their brother, sister, aunt, uncle, or whatever may have been members of the Viet Cong. And what they really were doing was getting medications for them.
We had circled a village one time thinking that we were protecting them. So we set up a perimeter around them. 10, 11 o'clock at night when it's all dark, they're shooting out at us. We leave them food, we would give them water or whatever, candy every once in a while. You see the kids, and they always wanted candy. It's disheartening when they turn around and shoot at you after doing all that.
The kids would be there at the dump when you dump the garbage out. They'd be there with 5-gallon buckets trying to catch the food garbage to take back. I don't know if they took it back to their animals or if they took it back to eat, but that made you feel bad.
There was always that fear or threat that this person could be harboring a grenade or a bomb or something.
You couldn't trust anybody. You didn't let kids get within 20 feet of you, women or anybody like that, unless somebody else was searching them or whatever.
Quite often we would get sniper fire from There was a little village across the river, and it's a strange sensation to be laying there in your bunker for the first time, hearing that whizzing sound of bullets going over your head.
The closer it got to time to come home, the more panic-stricken everybody got.
It started to become an issue because you had people that had 3 or 4 days left in the country, and then they were going to be going home and rotating out, and they'd end up getting shot and killed. And you'd say, well, geez, what, you know, what's the purpose here of making it 11 months and you die in the 12th month?
The short-timers always knew that something's going to happen before we got to leave. So every time we had an incoming round, it was panic.
Everybody called the planes Freedom Birds, and they called going home, going back to the world.
You get in that plane and you're with a whole bunch of guys going home. They've been in Vietnam for a year, doing whatever. So we're on the plane and it takes off from Cam Ranh Bay. This is a huge air base on the coast and a big resupply place. You get up and all of a sudden a roar. And the second part of the roar is a two-part roar when you get to the States.
I remember as soon as the plane touched down, everybody cheered on the plane, you know, just a cheering. And then we disembarked and they gave us a steak dinner.
They offer you a steak. Well, I said, no, I don't want it. I just want to get out of here. So I told the guys, I said, guys, let's just, everybody turns it down and we'll get out of here that much quicker. Well, we all turned it down. A few of the guys said, no, I want it. So then we end up waiting for them to eat, and we should have taken it. But, yeah, well, one of the happiest days of my life, really, getting back home.
You didn't wear a uniform off base, simply because you didn't want the hassle. Now, I don't know of anybody that was spit at or attacked or anything, but I do know a lot of snide comments and looks and things like that people were aware of.
Those poor folks, there wasn't any of them that would want to actually stand up and say that I'm an American veteran and I served in Vietnam. You were just absolutely looked down upon at that time, and that's not right. That is not right.
They called us baby killers, and they're really disrespectful to us. You got to hate the war. You can't hate the soldiers or the warriors, you know. And I think that was the mistake folks made. I did everything I could think of to get out of going, but I still went. And I think most of the guys that were drafted, you know, they didn't wake up in the morning and say, oh boy, I got to go fight a war.
We didn't create the war. We went there to do what we thought was right for our country. But when you came home, you didn't feel that way.
The way things were handled back then, at least commonly, I think it was just you came back and good, you're back and that's done. But there was no decompression, no talking about it.
Chelsea here was such a still was a nice little small town at that time. People didn't tell you one way or the other if they were for it or against it. I think they just kept it to themselves. Yeah, when I came back, this life was going on like you had never gone over there.
When I finally got back from Vietnam, I wouldn't talk to anyone. All I wanted to do was forget it, put it behind me.
My dad always remarked how the war didn't bother me when I got back. I think it did. I just didn't let it know because I didn't want it. People back in the States would not understand what I just went through. And I didn't expect them to understand.
The mentality, you know, that they were right and we were the bad guys was the way it was when we came home. So, especially around a college town like Ann Arbor, it was very awkward.
You get kind of seduced into thinking, you know, you're coming back from a war, you're looking good, and you'd think people would, you know, kind of slap you on the back or give you a high five or something like that. But it wasn't that way. There wasn't like a parade.
I can remember marching in Memorial Day parades where you virtually had to shout at people to stand up for the flag as it would come by. And nowadays,
I mean, even the young kids, everybody's on their feet right now. I mean, just a lot more outpouring.
I never experienced any of that negativity. Now, you can talk all you want about the moral aspect of that war, but I went there. There are 780 guys walking around, or people walking around right now that if I didn't get off my ass, they wouldn't be walking around.
This is now what is left of the American involvement in Vietnam. The U.S. Embassy behind me has been completely looted.
I think the saddest part of Vietnam was we lost 50,000 troops over there. Hundreds of thousands were lost limbs. Since they've come back, 80,000 have committed suicide. And basically 6 weeks after we pulled out, we lost. North Vietnam took over South Vietnam. Everything we left there for them, they got.
The war broke out, I was gung-ho. Yeah, we had to stop this domino effect over there. And I was ready to go and do my part, but now looking back, because what changed? Nothing changed. The communists still ended up with all of Vietnam. So,
if you look back on it, Vietnam is a communist country. So in one sense, the mission wasn't accomplished. But at the same time, I think from the overall mission was, because the Soviet Union fell. And even though we weren't able to stop them at that domino, it was expensive for the other side as well.
If you talk to these kids over there when they were injured and why they did this, they all to a man said, I'm fighting to protect my buddy. He's in the trench next to me. You know, I'm covering his back, he's covering mine. But they were doing it for this country. And for them to be treated like this when they come back there, shame on America. And you see a little bit of that in these wars, okay? If we're politically not smart enough to stay out of these wars in the first place, then let's at least respect the veterans. God bless them.
The support is for the soldier. You might not support what they're doing, but the support is for the soldier. I tell you, you will not find larger community support than what we have at our Memorial Day Parade. Just an absolutely incredible turnout. Chelsea is one of the most supportive communities I've ever seen. Just an incredible community.
Me going around town wearing the hat and having people come up and tell me thank you after 46 years, it means so much. So I can't stress enough to you people, when you see a vet, tell them thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. I always say that.
Today, if I see an individual in uniform and have the opportunity where I can comment to him, it'll be a positive comment and a handshake, or buy him a beer or whatever. But that would have never happened. Real common phrase between Vietnam vets is welcome home.
After 30 years of denial, I can stand up proud and tell you that I am a Vietnam veteran that survived.
We do not seek the destruction of any government, nor do we covet a foot of any territory. But we insist, and we will always insist, that the people of South Vietnam shall have the right of choice, the right to shape their own destiny in free elections in the South or throughout all Vietnam under international supervision. And they shall not have any government imposed upon them by force and terror, so long as we can prevent it.
people are pretty weird too. They are really, really small. A large male is about your size.